Hi, I'm Ron DeJesus, Field Chief Privacy Officer at Transcend. You know, I've always loved the roundtable format. Real, unscripted conversations between people who are actually doing the work. And I wanted to bring that into privacy. Similar to an actors roundtable where they share their common challenges behind the scenes of Hollywood, I wanted to pull the curtain back and show you what it's like for a real Chief Privacy Officer. I brought together 3 incredible privacy pros, Brandon Kerstens with Match Group, Adaora Amankwah with Yum Brands, and Kelly Peterson from Grindr. But we'll have an honest, unfiltered conversation that hopefully provides you with some incredible insights as well. So let's get into it. This is Transcend's Chief Privacy Officer Roundtable. Brandon, Kelly, and Adaora, thank you so much for being here. It's not every day that I get 3 incredible privacy pros in the same room who want to share their perspectives on camera, so I'm taking full advantage of that. And I actually feel like I've assembled the privacy Avengers, you know, like just superstars in their field. But before we get into the good stuff, like AI governance, how our role has evolved, how we get a seat at the executive table, I want to bring it back a bit and start at the basics and get into a little bit of how you got into privacy. So Brandon, let's start with you. How did you get into this space?
So thrilled to be here, really excited, Ron. But first, I just want to pause and give credit where credit is due. Like, thank you for bringing this group together.
The Avengers together.
And like giving our profession a platform like this for these conversations. It's really fantastic.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Okay, so to get to your question, I came to privacy through the law. So I started my career in private practice. I was working a lot with technology and privacy issues, and I was really drawn to this sort of task of helping organizations navigate the messy space between innovation and regulation.
Right.
And so that sort of followed me throughout my career. And even today, I'm still in that space of navigating the messiness of innovation and regulation.
Because it continues to be messy.
No shortage, right? Like, I would actually love it if there was like a day or a week every year where it was just like the privacy world didn't change fundamentally. That would be really nice. But no, I absolutely love it. Love what I do. It's a very engaging profession and it's incredibly rewarding.
Kelly, we're both not lawyers.
Correct?
No offense. But how about you? I know you've had a really interesting journey and background, so tell me a bit about how you got into privacy.
Yeah, it's about as non-linear a path, I think, as one could take. Thought about going the law school route, took the LSAT. Looking back, happy that I didn't then follow through, because I started out after college at a fintech working in biz dev, which is really where I started to learn the contracting side of business and data flows and needing to understand, you know, how the engineering side of the house worked. And then I left and totally pivoted to education, and I taught high school for almost 10 years, high school English,
incredible.
Which is actually a wonderful training ground for the messiness of privacy and getting people to listen to you who, they always wanted to listen to me, right? Teenagers, but really it was a great breeding ground and being able to decipher dense concepts and material and break it down for people who that wasn't their subject matter. So finding my way back into a fintech company after leaving education, I was able then to marry my loves together, and I volunteered to become privacy officer when GDPR was coming aboard, because you didn't need to be an attorney. You just needed to be able to understand data flows, be able to read dense text and break it down. So that's where I find myself now.
Awesome. And Adaora, you've had such a storied past, and I know you haven't gone down the linear legal route. How did you get into privacy?
Yeah, I almost feel like a bit of a hybrid between Kelly and Brandon. So I did go to law school, but I'm not an attorney. So after law school, I started a career in litigation, insurance litigation.
Oh, nice.
And I was horrible at it. I hated it, and it hated me just as much. So at the time, it was really hard to kind of transition to a new field or a new career. So I went back to school. I went and did a master's in international corporate law. And I loved it. I was exposed to internet law and corporate governance. So that kind of led me to establish my new route in compliance. And it's been a windy road since then. So I started off in financial regulations, pivoted into grocery supply compliance. And yes, that is a real thing.
I love it.
In the UK at least. And big data was a big buzzword at the time. So I was like itching to get into big data, and privacy came along 2018, and I put my hand up, and that was it. Never looked back.
So it sounds like none of us grew up and said, we want to be chief privacy officers. And that's really interesting. Everyone has come from really diverse backgrounds. You know, me specifically, I came from audit, actually. Worked for the Big Four, worked in-house for Coach and then Grindr and Tinder as well. But I just enjoy the more operational aspects of our job. If we think about how the chief privacy officer role has evolved over the past 10, even 5 years, how do you think it's evolved to, you know, be more broad than just compliance? Brandon, why don't you start? Yeah.
I think it's evolved dramatically over the last, even like you say, 5 years.
Yeah.
I think initially when GDPR came into force and companies started to grapple with privacy as a topic, I think they looked to us to sort of understand how do they fit into the organization, what value do they add, where do they belong, what do they do? And I think it was very reactive. They saw us as a risk manager, you know, someone you could go to after something went wrong. And I think now, over the last 5 years, I've seen us become strategic advisors, enabling the business, right?
Problem
We
solvers.
have this great new AI tool we need to implement to improve the experience for our users, or, you know, improve efficiency for our employees. How do we do that? And then they come to you to help provide that roadmap.
Kelly, do you wear that AI governance hat at Grindr as well?
I do, actually. I think it makes sense too, because the way I see privacy officers or privacy programs is really as neural networks of a company. Very rarely are there other functions that work and connect so many different departments, because we have to understand where the data is coming in, where it's flowing out, who's using it internally. So when you have something like AI governance, which is essentially just tacking on to the privacy principles that we are already leading within our company, it makes sense. But I think that our title is not doing us justice, because I think what we really are chief trust officers. We are engendering the trust of our consumers or whoever our customer base is, but also our internal stakeholders, by showing that we're not a department of no, that we're not just many in-house regulators, that we're not just a compliance function, but we are business enablers and business partners.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. I think with the work that we do, we've had to kind of know the business inside out, and with data growing as such a big commodity, probably the most valuable commodity we have now, we're really well placed to do the strategic advice and help the business, you know, handhold a little bit in areas that aren't strictly privacy.
We're there to help businesses take educated and informed risks. We're not there to say no risks can be taken at all, but it's what's the ethical, what's the legal, what's the right way to go about doing what we want to do.
But how do we actually change the mindset of the executive team to actually let them know that we're business enablers? We're not the house of go. Even our partners like product engineering, marketing, is it just education? Is it like, how do we get a seat at the executive table so that we're able to demonstrate our business value?
It's really tough. And I think it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to get to that place where you're a trusted partner. But it does come down to asking, do I deserve a seat at the table? Have I earned that seat at the table, right? And I think when you demonstrate value over time, they're going to bring you in early, they value your advice, and they look to you to provide that roadmap as to how to get to where they want to go.
I like that, demonstrate over time, but I also want to caveat or piggyback off that, we have to stop being humble. I think a lot of us in our field, or like, they're going to notice the value I bring, they're going to like me one day, right? No, I think, and especially as, you know, like a woman in corporate America coming from the Midwest, where those kind of humbleness values are ingrained in you, we have to be more willing to sing the praises of what we're doing, what our department's doing. You have to have an advocate in whomever you're reporting to say, I deserve this seat. My team deserves this recognition. And so we also have to bring ourselves forward in those conversations and not wait for them to invite us to the table, but kind of almost demand that we be at the table.
Right. And I think one thing that has helped me to be able to do that is really trying to align with the company goals. So almost stepping outside of privacy, understanding what that 3-year roadmap looks like, to your point, Brandon, and trying to align, okay, from a data perspective, this is how I can support you, or from a, whatever it is, whatever we're trying to do, how can I support you?
Yeah, I think a large part of our role is not just compliance, it's building relationships. If you cannot build relationships with the partners that you support, if you can't speak the language of engineering, if you can't use Atlassian tools, for example, you are going to be seen as just a roadblock. So I definitely think building relationships is critical to our role.
You're so right, because I think, though, sometimes we have to draw that line directly to how our work unblocks the product roadmap and enables the business, and not assume that they understand, because we live, eat, and breathe what we do, and it makes sense to how our work unblocks our engineers, unblocks our product team.
You really had a pithy way of saying that when we first were talking about this, Kelly.
Yeah, what I like to say at Grindr is that products aren't developed despite privacy, they're enabled by privacy.
Love that.
Because, the way that we went about eliciting consent for use of sensitive data for AI model training and allowing users the ability to toggle off or override legitimate interests for non-sensitive data, that has now unblocked our AI product roadmap for the next 5 to 7 years, because you have to start with that foundation before you can actually start building. So that's privacy. That's an example, and an example that I said, this is what we did. This is what we brought to you. This is how we partnered with you.
Yeah. And each time you do that, you have another building block that goes into that foundational relationship, the trust, the partnership.
Yes.
And it just builds over time, and then they come to you proactively in the future, bringing the projects to you.
Yeah, seen as a department of how, not a department of know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Brandon, you had a really great use case when we were chatting around partnering with the business around Tinder's The Game.
Oh yeah, the game.
The game game.
Which is a really cool
I love this example.
new AI feature, like a surprise and delight feature from Tinder, which is essentially an AI tool, which is a date simulation so that users can test their game, right? Their flirting skills. And we embedded senior privacy counsel, Kelsey, on the project team from the very beginning.
Nice.
So Kelsey was able to put in place very important privacy principles from the beginning of that project, right?
Privacy by design, essentially.
Privacy by design, essentially, while ensuring really great business outcomes. So understanding fundamentally what they were trying to achieve, and then how do we do that in a way that still embeds privacy principles, right? And when this feature launched, our CEO sent around a note to the entire organization personally thanking each member of the project team. And Kelsey was named right there, along with folks from product and engineering. And so I think it's a really great example of how privacy can sort of show up, be collaborative, and earn that seat at the table.
And also that top level messaging is just so crucial as well. Adaora at Yum, are you doing a lot of this type of engagement too?
Yeah, we are. We actually have a bit of a seat at the board table. We started board reporting 2 years ago, and we only got that opportunity by aligning with the business strategy. So we've spoken a lot about unblocking. The key for us was unlocking. We started becoming this function of unlocking opportunities with, I support 4 brands, and just being able to leverage that scale. Privacy was really key to that, because leveraging the scale is all about leveraging the data. And the board is now interested in that strategic help that we can offer to the business.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. And it goes right back to the relationship, right? Like, you can connect all of the dots throughout the organization and then add extra value on top of your day job.
And notice none of us had said anything related to Article 27 of the GDPR or avoiding fine, right? Everything is about yes, that's a component, but if you're doing privacy by design, if you're aligning through a principled approach, that happens naturally. But if you're focused on unblocking the business and solving problems, I think that's more paramount of what our day-to-day jobs are.
That threat of fines only goes so far. At some point, the business really does use that to view you as a roadblock, to view you as just a compliance person.
I love what you said earlier about being the office of trust, because I find that the business is more able to just talk to us about what they're doing, and they trust you to be able to put your hand up and say, okay, we may have an issue here, let me take this away and solve it, rather than knowing that you're just going to say, well, we can't do that, which is what they used to expect from us.
And I think that trust is how you can build relationships internally. I think for a long time, there's been a story of privacy and marketing and comms are, mortal enemies of one another. That's actually some of my best strategic partners, because again, we know all the details. We can go to them and say, okay, if we had to defend this in the press, if we have to explain this feature in a blog post, how would we go about doing it, and how do you want to know those details? And being in the privacy department allows you to unlock those relationships too.
I think it shows when when folks are coming to you proactively.
Yes.
It really demonstrates that you're doing your job well.
Yes.
Especially engineers.
Oh, yes.
I was waiting for the engineers to come on board and start building those relationships because, they can just power on and do their projects, and then we have to kind of chase them. But they're coming to us now and they're saying, look, we want to do this in 6 months' time. Is there anything we want to, look into from privacy
6 months' time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's
fantastic.
great.
That's great.
That used to
revolutionary.
It used to be.
We did this yesterday.
Yeah.
No, and I think it's important, like when they come to you, taking this like yes and approach, right? Like borrowing it from the improv world, but like, yes, that's a great idea.
Or
And
Ariana
here's,
Grande. Sorry, I had to.
yeah, and saying, yes, absolutely, great idea. Here's how we can do that.
Yeah.
And let's do it in this way so that we can avoid a lot of the downfalls and keep users' trust, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are privacy champions. It's great. It just happened yesterday. One of my data engineers was like, I think we need to check with privacy.
Yeah.
It's like, thank you, yes.
It's a big win.
It's huge, so.
I love how we're all experiencing this because it wasn't like this in the past at all.
No.
No,
You
and I
would
think
even
that-
sorry.
I was going to say that's really, I think, back to the question of how we've evolved. Like, I think that really is traditionally, I remember back when GDPR was on the horizon, and some privacy professionals were like, oh, I'm going to be like a little mini regulator within the business. I'm like, you're not going to last very long because that's what everyone wants to avoid. How can we create a welcoming? How can we create an open door? How can we create that yes and? And I think we're seeing so many of us have that approach, and that's why it's all paying off, and we're seeing similarities across the board.
So everyone, we can't have a Chief Privacy Officer Roundtable without talking about AI governance. I know we've already spoken about the fact that as CPOs, we're the best suited to take on this role. I wanted to get your thoughts on what you're doing at your companies with respect to AI governance, with respect to ensuring transparency, consumer trust. Talk to me a little bit about what's working at your roles.
I agree with you. Privacy professionals are uniquely equipped to handle AI governance. We've built governance programs in the past. We can take complex laws and translate them into real world policy and practice. But AI isn't just a privacy issue, right? And I think the best AI governance programs that I've seen bring in a cross-section of people by design, right? So you bring in legal, and you bring in trust and safety, and you bring in security, because you need all of those voices to land in the right place on AI governance for your organization.
And you've already established those relationships anyway.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. So you're talking to the same people you would talk to any other day of the week. The topic is just AI governance. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to add, and we're so process driven. In privacy, we've just spent so much time establishing assessment process, risk analysis processes, and those are the processes that for us, we really have to leverage at this time of AI governance.
Yeah, I think we're well suited to be the leaders of the process. It goes back to the relationships that we've already developed. We've already worked through frameworks. We already see how messy this can get. And essentially, AI is powered by data. So then who better to understand that than privacy? But we can't do it alone. We can help. At Grindr, I am working on policies for our internal use of AI tools. What's going to help our engineers work more efficiently, whether that's, Copilot or things like that. How are we going to bring tools in through privacy preserving mechanisms so that our user data remains safe and in our environment? But then also, what are the policies for our internal development of models that we may be building, or features that are powered by AI but not training models? And how do you explain all that to the end user? So it's really, what's our responsibility? How do we craft that narrative? What are the policies? But you need engineers to do the testing to look for bias and things like that. We can't do it alone.
The one thing I will say, though, is while I think we're really well equipped to handle it, I do think it needs to be a distinct hat that you wear.
Yes.
A distinct hat from the privacy hat. It can be worn by the same person, right? It absolutely can, but it needs to be a distinct hat because there are distinct challenges that AI bring that don't overlap perfectly with privacy. And so I think it does need to be its own distinct role.
And I'll say it too, it warrants additional comp.
I was just gonna say,
I mean, no,
it needs
seriously.
this is massive amounts of work. This isn't just like, oh, you can do this too. It's a whole other field and facet that we're entering into.
It's not just, having an additional hat. It's requiring additional resources, perhaps additional skill sets, being further educated.
Absolutely, 100% additional comp. It should be reflected in our title, perhaps resources. We can't be expected to just continue to add without having additional support.
1000%. Final question for everyone here, and I want to talk about what keeps you up at night, the challenges that you're facing, whether it be dealing with, what is it now, the 20th state privacy law, this sense of deregulation. How do we actually best equip our privacy teams to deal with the plethora of laws at play? Tell me about what challenges you're facing and how you would plan to address them. And Brandon, I wanted to start with you.
So I think for me, and maybe this is a little too macro, but it's just the pace of change, right? Like it's been nonstop since 2018, right? So for me, how do I keep the team motivated? How do I keep them engaged? How do I keep the performance up, even though each week there's some new massive development in the privacy world? It can be a really exhausting pace. And so trying to keep people's spirits up is always a challenge. I think for me, the most important thing is just talking to your peers, like we're doing today, right? Like having a conversation and just saying, this is what's going on. This is what I'm struggling with at the moment. How are you doing things?
We should
Are
work in
seeing
silos.
this?
Yeah.
100%.
Really?
There's so much privacy sometimes, like where you feel like you can't share, maybe you can't talk about, but I think that's something that we need to debunk, is that it's perfectly fine. I will reach out to Brandon, I will reach out to other people in my network and say, oh, you don't have this figured out either. Thank goodness, right? So that you
I'm not
don't
alone.
feel, I'm not alone. I'm not isolated, and you don't have to pretend as if, a month after a regulation comes out, you absolutely know how you're going to operationalize it right away, because nobody does. It causes a wrench in the system, and that's okay, and to be okay with that.
Yeah, I'm going to bounce right off this theme. Just the way, the speed at which things are developing, but it's also not as predictable as it was in the past. So, just staying ahead of the changes and trying to keep the business engaged, because I do worry about that kind of mental fatigue of federal law is coming. No, it's not. And we need to prepare. So it's just kind of just staying on the same, keeping the business in a position where they feel that we know what's going on, even when we don't, right?
And if you've approached it like we've all talked about today, through a principled approach, you have privacy by design, you have that good, strong foundation, you're going to be okay. And going back to, you can only control what you can control. Right.
I mean, I agree, but at the same time, last year alone, there were 17 AI-related bills that Newsom signed, for example, and across 45 states, I think there were 700 bills. Like that just gives me a little bit of anxiety, TBH. So I really appreciate the fact that, Brandon, as you had mentioned, that we need to take care of ourselves. Right? But you guys, this has been such an incredible opportunity for me. It's not, again, every day that I get 3 privacy luminaries in the same room. And to quote Lori from The White Lotus, I'm just happy to have a seat at the table. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. This is great.